I've always believed that silence in families says more than words. You don't need yelling to feel a wall go up between people. Sometimes, the quiet says it all, and lately, that quiet had a pulse. I'd moved back into my childhood home 6 months ago. Divorce does that, it pushes you backward before you can figure out how to move forward. At 37, I never expected to be sleeping in the same room I painted purple when I was 13. Dinner was simple that night. Roasted chicken, canned green beans, and awkward glances. My mother, Delphine, fussed over Grant, my brother-in-law, like he was the only man who'd ever lifted a fork correctly. She reached across the table, brushing imaginary lint off his shoulder. Her laugh was too sweet. Her hand lingered too long. "Mom, you're babying him," I said, half joking. Geneva, my sister, laughed it off. "You're always reading too much into things, Lenora." I smiled, but something in my gut coiled. Maybe I was imagining things. Or maybe I wasn't. The neighborhood was still as ever. You could hear sprinklers clicking and dogs barking a few houses down. Porch lights flicked on in a rhythmic glow as dusk swallowed the streets. It was the kind of suburb where everyone waves, but no one knows your name. Around midnight, I stepped out of my room for water and noticed something odd, my mother's shadow gliding past the hallway toward Grant's room. No knock. No words. Just soft footsteps and the creak of the floorboards. She told me the next day she was just checking the locks. But I heard no click of the door. It started adding up, the way her voice softened when she spoke to him, like she was confiding in a lover, not her son-in-law. Geneva brushed me off when I mentioned it again. "You have an overactive imagination," she said, eyes tired, tone sharp. But I wasn't imagining the way the air shifted when the three of them were in the same room. I couldn't let it go. I bought a small camera online, told Mom it was to watch the front porch. "You never know these days," I said. Truth was, I wasn't afraid of strangers. I was afraid of secrets. I waited till everyone left for groceries. I wedged the camera near the hallway vent, pointed it just so, facing the stretch of carpet outside Grant's door. My hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from crossing a line I never thought I would. Trust is fragile. Once cracked, it never sounds the same again. The hum of the air conditioning nearly masked the soft beep the camera made. I sat in my room afterward, back against the bed frame, staring at my hands. If I'm wrong, I'll destroy the footage. But if I'm right... A week passed. Tuesday night, I plugged the camera into my laptop. I clicked through uneventful nights, cat walking by, Delphine passing once with laundry. Then there it was. Timestamp, 2:13 a.m. Delphine. Quiet. Intentional. Opening Grant's door without knocking. Slipping inside like she belonged. She didn't come out for almost an hour. I froze. Mouse still under my fingers, heartbeat dull in my ears. I watched it again. And again. Maybe there was an explanation, maybe he needed help with something. Maybe it was nothing. But her body language told another story. Intimate. Familiar. Too comfortable. Sometimes, seeing the truth hurts worse than suspecting it. I printed a still frame. Just one. Her hand on the doorknob. Her back to the camera. The next day, I showed Geneva. Sat her down at the kitchen table, slid the image across to her. Her face twisted like she'd bitten into something rotten. "You're sick, Lenora. She's our mother." "She's something," I replied. She pushed the photo back at me like it burned. Grant stood by the sink, eyes locked on the floor. Not a word. Delphine walked in minutes later. Saw the tension. Her voice cracked. "What's going on?" She looked at me with mock confusion, tears forming too fast. "This is what you think of me?" she whispered. In families like ours, denial is the religion we all practice. That night, no one spoke to me. Not at dinner. Not before bed. I was the crazy one again, the one who couldn't let things go. I lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling, scrolling through my phone. The camera app was still open. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. If one secret hides in the dark, what else might be crawling there too? Then came the creak. Outside my door. "Lenora, are you awake?" My mother's voice. Soft. Too soft. I was folding laundry in the hallway when it slipped out from between two old pillowcases, a faded Polaroid, edges curling, colors washed by time. My mother's hand was nestled in Grant's, both of them grinning under the shade of our backyard oak. It must have been 10 years ago, maybe longer, during one of those forced family BBQs where nothing ever truly felt like family. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. Something in the way she leaned toward him, her fingers wrapped just so, it wasn't motherly. Not to me. Not anymore. I remember Geneva teasing me that day for being the family watchdog. Said I was always looking for ghosts where there were none. Maybe she was right then. But now? Now I saw what I hadn't known how to name before. I used to think my mother just missed having a son. That she overcompensated, maybe projected. But the affection in that photo wasn't about longing, it was about possession. That night, I slipped into bed earlier than usual. Geneva and Mom were still downstairs. Grant had taken the guest room again. I waited, eyes on the ceiling, breath steady. Just past midnight, the house stilled. I got up, tiptoed down the hall, and pulled the camera card out like I was disarming a bomb. Back in my room, the footage loaded slow, old laptop, slow internet. I fast-forwarded. The timestamp flicked by. 1:47 a.m. There she was. Delphine. Barefoot. Silk robe. A glass of wine in one hand. She didn't knock. She didn't pause. She walked right in. My heart clenched. I muted the volume, but I didn't need sound to feel what I was seeing. Then I turned it back up, just in time to hear soft laughter. Then Grant's voice, "You don't have to sneak around so much." My hand gripped the desk edge, the wood biting into my palm. It wasn't innocent. It wasn't delusional. It was real. I transferred the file to a USB drive and slid it under the false bottom of my makeup drawer. Just in case. I used to think knowing the truth would give me peace. I was wrong. It only made everything quieter and meaner. The next evening, Geneva cooked dinner, out of the blue. Said we hadn't eaten together in a while. I knew it was a setup the second I walked in. She already had the table set, wine poured, plates warm. Grant showed up 15 minutes late and sat right across from me. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Delphine was dressed like she was going to Sunday brunch, not a family meal. She barely acknowledged me, but her hand found its way to Grant's arm the moment he mentioned a rough week at work. Geneva cleared her throat. "You've seemed a little off lately, Lenora. Everything okay?" I stared at her, then at Delphine. Their eyes held just long enough to confirm what I already knew, they'd talked. They were trying to corner me in my own home. So I smiled. "Is the hallway camera footage part of the family trust now?" I asked, sipping my wine like it was nothing. The silence broke something invisible in the room. Geneva dropped her fork. Delphine blinked too slowly. Grant looked down at his plate, his smirk twitching. "I don't know what you're talking about," Delphine said, tone smooth. "Of course not," I said, pushing back my chair. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood up and walked out. My hands were steady, but inside I was spiraling. They want me to stay silent, because truth makes cowards of us all. By the next morning, I knew the damage had been done. Old friends stopped answering my texts. A high school friend messaged, "Geneva said you've been acting off. Are you okay?" It was happening. The same slow erasure I'd seen before. When people don't want to face the truth, they paint the truth teller as unstable. So I started writing everything down. Time-stamped. Dated. Names, words, gestures, facts. Because when a house is on fire, the first thing people do is pretend it's just a warm breeze. In a family that runs on denial, the truth is always treated like a disease. Around 3 in the morning, I stirred in bed. Something felt wrong. The air was still, too still. I sat up and saw it, my bedroom door, cracked open halfway. I always locked it. I checked it every night. I got up, barefoot, and stepped into the hallway. No sound. Then I turned to the corner shelf. The camera moved. Tilted slightly downward, just enough to catch nothing. Nothing useful. Back inside, on my nightstand, a sticky note. Pale yellow. Slanted handwriting. "Sleep well, sweetheart." I stared at it until my vision blurred, my fingers tingling. They knew I was watching. But they didn't know how much I had already seen. I started that morning like nothing had happened. No mention of the sticky note. No change in tone. Just coffee, toast, and a quiet nod when I passed Delphine in the hallway. She was humming something under her breath, old jazz, maybe. The same tune she used to hum when we were kids, and she wanted us to believe everything was fine. I smiled back. A practiced, vacant thing. Then I drove to the hardware store and picked up a second camera, smaller, better range, motion sensitive. I installed it just above the molding inside my room, facing the door. That way, I'd know if anyone else ever walked in again without a knock or a sound. After lunch, I climbed up into the attic. The insulation crunched under my knees. There was dust on everything, except one spot near the far beam. A footprint, half smudged, not mine. I checked the garage next. One of Dad's old toolboxes had been opened. The lock on it was snapped. They weren't just watching. They were digging. I started comparing Wi-Fi logs. Old habits from a past job kicked in. Number of devices connected, power spikes at odd hours, even router resets that didn't come from me. There was a pattern forming, quiet, deliberate. Dad used to say, still waters run deep, and they hide the worst currents. I never understood what he meant until now. Secrets don't scream. They sit. They wait. If they thought I was crazy, maybe that was an advantage. Let them keep thinking it. Crazy people get ignored. But crazy people also see everything. Later that day, the mail came. Junk mostly, but one envelope stood out. Handwritten, thick, and yellowed at the edges. It was addressed to my father, postmarked 3 years ago. He'd already been gone 6 months by then. I opened it on instinct. Inside was a letter from an estate attorney, some firm in San Antonio. Legal language, stiff and dense. But what it boiled down to was this: just before his death, Dad had amended the deed on a small investment property. Delphine and Grant were listed as joint beneficiaries. Not Geneva. Not me. My pulse ticked up as I read it again. This wasn't just about closeness. It was leverage, control, money. And someone had tried to tear it. There was a rip across the corner, just shy of the signature. Someone wanted it gone, then hesitated. The betrayal I'd felt before now had weight. A paper trail. It wasn't about love. It was strategy. Positioning. I folded the letter, tucked it under a pile of sketch pads in my room, and took a walk around the block. I needed air. I needed noise. The next morning, I called a friend of Geneva's, casual, nothing urgent. Asked if she wanted to grab a mimosa at the nail salon. She bit. Geneva showed up 20 minutes later, surprised but not bothered. She never turned down free polish or free booze. We talked nonsense at first. Celebrity gossip. Work stress. Then she leaned back, half tipsy, and said, "You think Mom loves you less? Try being the one who agrees with everything just to keep the peace." I waited. Let the silence hang. "Delphine and Grant seem pretty close these days," I said. She went stiff. The wine in her glass swirled untouched. "It's none of my business," she said finally. Then she looked at me, just a second too long. "If you keep pulling the thread," she whispered, "you better be ready for the whole sweater to unravel." So she knew. She just didn't want to wear the truth on her own skin. That night, I dreamt I was in a hallway, dim, endless. Every door had my name carved into it, but none would open. Behind one, I heard laughter. My mother's voice. She never did understand what family really meant. I jolted awake. The house was silent. I walked into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. There was a mug on the counter, lipstick on the rim. Delphine hadn't left the house that night. At least that's what she said. A chill settled into my chest. What if I wasn't imagining things? What if I still wasn't seeing the whole picture? I went back to my room and pulled open the drawer where I kept my journal. Gone. Pages of names, dates, notes vanished. I tore through my dresser, under the bed, even the laundry basket. No one in the house claimed to have seen it. Of course. That's when I knew I had crossed a line. And they were letting me know it. I installed a third camera. In the hallway, facing the living room. Then I sat down and backed up every video, every photo, every message to a cloud folder only I could access. Let them call me paranoid. I wasn't paranoid anymore. I was preparing for war. The front porch light buzzed faintly overhead as I stepped up to the door. A soft breeze brushed against my cheek, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. This wasn't just dinner. This was their stage, and I'd been summoned to play along. Inside, the scent of roasted chicken mixed with something old, maybe lavender, maybe just the smell of memories turned stale. The dining room looked the same, faded wallpaper, polished cherrywood table, and photographs that seemed to yell louder than any of them ever did. One frame caught my eye, Grant and Geneva on their wedding day. Both smiling like they owned the world. Delphine met me in the hallway. Her hug lingered too long. She said, "Good to have you back," but her eyes flicked to Grant before she let go. Like she needed his approval to welcome me. Geneva was already seated, her nails tapping the stem of a wine glass. Her smile barely moved. When I reached for the bread basket, she subtly adjusted her elbow, a flicker of resistance. I sat down, folded my napkin, and told myself to breathe. They were playing gracious. I was in their arena now. We started with pleasantries. Grant droned on about some big expansion project. Delphine laughed at all the right moments, even touched his arm when he said, "The client pulled out last minute, again." She leaned in close, murmuring, "You always save the day." Geneva turned to me. "How's the graphic thing? Still tinkering with designs?" Her voice was light but hollow. "I've got a major client coming up," I said, keeping my tone even. "Branding overhaul for a retail chain." "That's nice," she replied, dismissively, like I'd said I was reorganizing spice racks. Midway through dinner, Delphine reached across again, resting her fingers on Grant's wrist as he talked about stress. He didn't pull away. His smile looked comforted. Something inside me sharpened. This wasn't maternal. It was familiar. Intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. I swallowed hard, but the taste of betrayal was already there. Not new. Just deeper now. After dessert, store-bought pie, barely touched, Geneva cleared her throat like she was setting a scene. "We're throwing Grant a little birthday thing next week," she said. "At the lake house. You remember the one?" I nodded slowly. And she glanced at Delphine, then back at me. "We're keeping it small. Family and close friends only." I tilted my head. "So I'm not invited?" Delphine didn't miss a beat. "It's nothing personal, sweetheart. Just something casual." She reached out, patted Geneva's knee. That was it. No explanation. No apology. I stared at them. Both so comfortable. Like this exclusion had been rehearsed. They planned this, I thought. Planned it without me. Like I'm the daughter that doesn't count. The chair creaked as I leaned back. I kept my face neutral, but something behind my ribs had gone hot and brittle. After dinner, I drifted toward the den to grab my bag. That's when I heard it. Grant's voice. Low, but clear. "If she keeps digging, she'll regret it. You know that." I froze. He was on the phone. Calm. Confident. She's already on edge. One more push and she'll break. I stepped into the doorway. He didn't flinch. He turned to me slowly, phone still in hand. "Don't, Lenora," he said. "Let this house run its way." I smiled. Just barely. I always wondered how snakes sounded before they struck. Then I turned, walked down the hall, and didn't stop until I was upstairs. Back in what used to be my room, now converted into a half-hearted office, I shut the door. I sat at the desk, pulled open the drawer, and found the USB stick right where I left it. My backup. I slid it into the port, opened the folder, and pulled up the footage again, Delphine entering Grant's room. Barefoot. Wine in hand. Her voice soft, almost affectionate. I copied the timestamps. Uploaded the clips to a second cloud folder. Redundant security. That's how you survive when the walls close in. I stared at the screen. "You pushed me to the edge," I whispered. "Now I decide how far I go." I woke to sunlight pouring through the blinds, the kind that usually softens the morning. But not this one. On the kitchen table, there was a neatly folded napkin, a cup of coffee already cooling, and a note in Delphine's cursive, "Let's forget last night ever happened." Of course she'd say that. Pretend it away, like everything else in this house. Geneva's SUV was gone. Grant's truck still sat outside, like a warning. I drank the coffee anyway, bitter as it was. My mind wouldn't stop circling back to what Grant said the night before. Let this house run its way. No. Not anymore. I sat at my desk and opened a blank document. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I needed to start writing things down that weren't just for evidence. Something human. A record of what it felt like to be erased from your own family by degrees. Around midday, I was in the sunroom reviewing receipts when the door creaked. Grant walked in, casual. No knock. He sat down across from me, too close. I know you've been recording us, he said, tone flat. That's not just paranoia, that's dangerous. I looked up. Calm. And what exactly have I captured that makes you nervous? His face tightened, just slightly. He leaned in. You keep pushing this, you're going to tear this family apart. I kept my hands folded, phone recording in my lap. She's fragile, he continued. Delphine doesn't deserve this. You're hurting her. That word again. Hurt. Like I was the wound. Some truths don't belong outside the walls they were born in. I held his gaze. Then maybe they shouldn't have grown in this house to begin with. He didn't reply. He just stood, adjusted his shirt cuffs, and walked out. I exhaled. Then uploaded the audio straight to my cloud folder. That evening, just before the sun dipped, I asked Delphine to meet me outside. She came out in a cardigan, glass of white wine in hand. We sat on the back porch, the wind playing with her hair like nothing was wrong. I know, I said. About the property. The amendment. The USB. She didn't flinch. You've always made things harder than they needed to be, Lenora. Did you ever love Dad? I asked. She took a slow sip. Then said, some things stay buried for good reason. She didn't deny it. Didn't even pretend to be surprised. I stood. I felt hollow, but not weak. Just emptied. Like something inside me had finally run dry. Later that night, I organized everything. Audio files. Property documents. The footage. I reached out to Mr. Cabot, my father's old attorney, and asked if he could spare 20 minutes for a call tomorrow. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about truth. Around midnight, I grabbed a sweater and went out to my car to retrieve some receipts I'd left in the glove box. That's when I saw them. All 4 tires slashed clean through. And on the windshield, a sticky note. You're not the only one who watches. I stepped back. No camera caught it. The hallway unit, I checked, had its batteries pulled. I filed a police report. They shrugged it off like it was neighborhood mischief. But I knew better. This wasn't mischief. This was a line crossed. They wanted silence. I was about to give them volume. The streetlights flickered orange as I pulled into the driveway. At first I thought it was just a failing bulb, but the timing was wrong. I carried my laptop bag into the house, ears alert. The world outside felt static, like waiting for something heavy to hit. Grant's truck sat across the street, engine off, lights on. I slowed the car, set the emergency brake. My heart clicked over. They were making moves while I was still stacking evidence. Inside, I flicked the hall light on, then off. Just to cast a shadow and test whether the camera sensor I'd installed was working. It was. The little red dot blinked. But something else was off. The battery compartment cover on the third cam was loosened. I clicked it shut, pressing the latch firmly. My pulse tapped in my ears. "If you're setting the trap, I'm baited," I muttered. I walked through the rooms quietly, scanning each one. Guest room, untouched. Den, dark. Stairs creaked too loud. Every shadow stretched longer than before. That night I lay awake, the house humming around me. At 3 a.m. I snapped awake to a loud bang outside. I shot out the bed, slipped into jeans and slippers, and crept to the window. My tires. All four had been slashed. Deep cuts in the rubber. I crouched, fingers running over the shredded rubber. A pale sticky note was plastered across the windshield, "You're not the only one who watches." My breath froze. The driveway echoed silence. I fetched my phone, snapped photos, backed up the footage later. I wasn't just a target anymore, I was documenting the strike. They wanted me to back down. Instead, I felt something fire inside. They meant this as a message. I'll respond with truth. The next night I arranged to meet my uncle, Harlan Kress. We sat in a dim-lit cafe at 10 p.m. coffee on the table. He slid me a manila envelope marked, "Ray Family Trust, 2004 Amendment." "This is just the beginning," he said. I opened it. Documents. Legal language. Signatures. The amendment showed Delphine and Grant named joint beneficiaries. Not Geneva. Not me. I asked questions. He answered. We discussed audit trails, backups, restraining orders. He said quietly, "Facts beat fear every time." I nodded, lifting my coffee. No emotion, just facts. That's how you win. Back home I installed motion sensors near the hallway outside Grant's room. I placed a voice-activated recorder in the den. I scrubbed through the footage again and caught Delphine parking outside my house at midnight. She paused under the porch light as if checking I wasn't inside. I froze the frame. I whispered, "They thought I was the only one watching. Now I'm the one recording their fear." My hands didn't shake. The fury in me firmed. I flipped the scene from defensive to offensive. Around dawn I lay on the couch, blanket wrapped, house quiet aside from the HVAC's low hum. My phone pinged. Anonymous message, "Nice little toy you built. Hope you enjoy watching your own fall." A smirk crossed my lips even though my heart hammered. They know. They've known ever since I placed the first camera. I sat up. I didn't panic. I whispered smoothly, "Then let's let them watch what happens next." The email came just before dusk, subject line, "Family Accountability Meeting." The phrase looked sterile, like something a corporation would send before firing you. The message said 7 p.m., living room. Required attendance. No agenda. I arrived early. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and old air. Geneva was perched on the couch, tapping her nails against her glass. Grant stood near the mantel, jaw tight, not looking at me. Delphine floated between them with that practiced calm of hers, the kind that covered rot with polish. When everyone settled, Delphine stood by the fireplace, folded her hands, and said, "We've been asked to address the recent accusations." Her tone was soft, rehearsed, almost saintly. I sat still, notebook on my lap, recording quietly. When you point one finger, I thought, 3 point back at you. The air was thick with performance. Geneva crossed her legs, looking anywhere but at me. Grant's eyes flickered between his wife and my mother, like a man balancing two masks. Then the real show began. A man in a suit entered, Delphine's attorney. He plugged a drive into the TV. The video appeared, the footage I had taken weeks ago. My footage. Only it wasn't the same. The lighting looked off, the motion stilted. Independent experts have verified, the attorney said, this video was manipulated, what's now called a deepfake. My chest tightened. The room murmured like a hive waking up. Grant smiled, slow, deliberate. Geneva leaned forward, whispering, "See? I told you she's unstable." I stayed silent. My mind was already piecing it together. They doctored my evidence. Probably planted it through that note on my windshield. They turned truth into fiction and fiction into a weapon. Delphine's expression never cracked. "Lenora," she said softly, "you've been under so much stress. We forgive you." Forgive me. That word almost made me laugh. Forgive me for catching them. I stared back, saying nothing. Fear moved aside, replaced by something sharper. They thought this was the end of my story. But the avalanche had already started rolling downhill. Then, just as the tension crested, the attorney's laptop chimed. A call. He hesitated, but the screen lit up anyway. Mamie Briggs, our former housekeeper, her name flashing across the monitor. The old woman's voice filled the room. "You all remember me," she said, steady, unsmiling. "You remember the night I heard the footsteps. And I remember who they belonged to." Delphine went pale. Grant shifted, his throat tightening. The attorney tried to mute her, but Mamie kept talking. "I left because I was told to. Because truth wasn't welcome under this roof. But I kept the tapes. And I kept my conscience." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. I replayed her words in my mind, I remember the footsteps. It wasn't just validation, it was oxygen. Geneva's eyes darted between us, panic softening her arrogance. For the first time, I saw doubt in her. They had planned a public execution. Instead, they'd handed me a microphone. When it ended, I stood. "If this is your version of accountability," I said, "then consider this my first statement of record." I left before anyone could speak. Outside, the air was cold, alive, electric. I didn't drive home right away. I just sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, letting the adrenaline settle. Later that night, in my room, I opened my journal. I wrote, "They tried to gaslight me into silence. But they forgot, I already recorded my own truth." I began sorting through everything, new evidence, voice clips, documents, the USBs. I was ready to go public if I had to. As I typed, I remembered a line from Katherine Johnson, "We will always have STEM with us. Some things will drop out of the sky and we'll never know why." I smiled faintly. Some truths drop into your lap, I thought. The real question is, will you catch them? The clock read 1:47 a.m. when my laptop pinged. A new message appeared, encrypted. The subject line read, "The original deed, proof inside." No sender name. No return address. Just a file. I leaned back, staring at it. My pulse slowed. Whoever sent it, they weren't guessing. They knew exactly what I needed. They made their move, I whispered. Good. Because I'm already 10 steps ahead. The morning light hadn't fully crept through the blinds when I opened the manila envelope Harlan left me. Dad's wax seal cracked with a soft pop, the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten even before you know what's inside. Inside was something I hadn't expected, a leather-bound journal, worn at the corners, faintly smelling of cedar and dust. The first page held a name written in a familiar hand, Grandma Ray. Dated 1998. I flipped through slowly. Her words were neat, deliberate. She wrote of patterns. Of promises never kept. Of watching Delphine and seeing echoes of her own brother's secrets Grandma had buried, but clearly never forgot. She described late-night visitors, a hidden room, and a silence that spread like mold. I sat back in my chair, the journal resting heavy in my lap. It wasn't just Delphine. This went back generations. And I was living inside a cycle they had all silently agreed to repeat. When the mirror is cracked, Grandma wrote, the reflection always lies. I stared out the window for a long time before logging into the secure site I'd built the night before. The footage, the real, untouched version, was queued. I uploaded it under the title The Hidden Room, Ray Family Truth. There was no turning back now. By noon, the video had been shared hundreds of times. My inbox buzzed with messages from names I hadn't heard since high school. Old neighbors, distant cousins, college classmates. Comments flooded in. Looks just like what happened at my aunt's place. My stepmother used to say the same words almost verbatim. This hits home. You're brave for doing this. Then Geneva texted me, please stop this before it tears everything apart. A voicemail from Grant followed, 27 seconds of controlled rage and veiled threats. I didn't answer. I just kept refreshing the page, watching the numbers climb. Watching the mask slip. They said I'd be invisible, I whispered, but now the world's watching. The next punch came by phone. Hospital caller ID. Delphine had collapsed. I sat frozen for a moment, then grabbed my bag and drove straight to the ER. At the lobby, I waited with Grandma's journal clutched like armor. Nurses wouldn't say much, stress-related cardiac symptoms was all I got. A doctor eventually approached me. You're listed as an emergency contact, he said, voice low. Media inquiries have started coming in. Do you want to speak on her behalf? I shook my head. No statements. Not yet. When I stepped into her room, Delphine lay pale against crisp sheets. For the first time in my life, she looked small. Not fragile, just exposed. She opened her eyes and saw me. There was no anger. No blame. Just recognition. We didn't speak. I walked out and didn't look back. Back at home, I got to work. Evidence archived, labeled, encrypted. Journal pages scanned. Audio backups triple-checked. I pulled out my dad's old estate records. One clause stood out, the LLC amendment giving Delphine and Grant sole power of attorney. Not anymore. I drafted a press release. Not for now, but for when the final nail was ready. The title, I Speak Not to Destroy, but to Heal. I scheduled a meeting with Naomi Cade, the journalist who broke the Wendell case. I'd followed her work for years. I typed out, I have a story. I'll share it when it matters most. Justice isn't vengeance. It's not a headline. It's waking up the people still living inside someone else's silence. That night, just before dawn, I sat on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees. A new message pinged. Subject, Final Deed, Download attached. No sender listed. I clicked. It was the original deed. The one signed by Grandma in 2003, the one they thought no longer existed. Equal ownership. My name right there in ink. Hidden from every family meeting, every legal document, every smug lie they'd ever fed me. I leaned back, blinked against the tears, and typed a reply. I've got our mirror. We're going to clean it. It had been a month since the hospital. 1 month since I stood at Delphine's bedside and said nothing. Since I walked out with a mix of clarity and ache I hadn't felt since the funeral. Time hadn't slowed. It hadn't sped up either. It just settled. And I let it. The invitation came from a neighbor, small event at the local community center. Generational truths, when silence breaks. She asked if I'd be willing to speak. I said yes without flinching. That Saturday, the room was filled with folks mostly older than me. Women in soft cardigans. Men holding their hats in their laps. And some younger ones too, phones in hand, pens ready. The kind of crowd you'd underestimate until they start nodding along. I didn't mention names. Just themes. Guilt passed like heirlooms. Loyalties wrapped around shame. The cost of swallowing what should have been spoken. I said, truth doesn't scream. It waits. And sometimes, all it needs is one voice to start echoing. Afterward, a woman in her 70s came up, hand trembling a little. You helped me open a conversation I buried in 1962. She touched my arm like we'd always known each other. I nodded, holding her gaze. No applause needed, just recognition. Back home, the mailbox held a letter. Handwritten. Postmarked 3 days earlier. I sat on the steps to open it. Delphine's handwriting. She wrote, I can't undo my choices. But I won't let them define you. Inside was a typed list, properties, accounts, all under the Ray family name. She'd signed off every bit of control. No lawyers. No press. Folded behind the list was a personal check. Start something that heals. She ended the letter with, tell Ray I remember the mirror now. I read that line again. And again. And then I cried. Not because she apologized. But because, for once, she saw me. Days later, I filed the papers to register something new, the Ray Collective. Not a charity. Not a crusade. Just a space. Women over 40, some younger, some older, all carrying things no one had dared name. We met on Saturdays. Potluck style. No speeches. Just stories. One afternoon, Geneva walked in. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. I stood, opened my arms, and we held each other like the clock had never broken. We never mentioned Grant. Some silences earn their place. On the wall above our meeting space, we painted a line, the truth doesn't set you free. It reminds you you were never truly alone. Weeks passed. One quiet Sunday, I sat in the backyard watching my niece toss a ball with the dog. She asked, why did they hide Grandma's mirror? I thought for a second, then answered, sometimes people think silence protects love. It doesn't. She nodded and ran off laughing. Just like that. I took Grandma's journal, framed it. Hung it in the hallway with the original deed beneath it. Not as a trophy. As a marker. That evening, I brewed coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through unread emails. One caught my eye. Subject, Ray Family Archives, we found a video file. I didn't open it right away. Some things don't hide because they're evil. Some just wait. For the right eyes.